As we travel with Jesus into his public ministry, we've seen him stand in his home synagogue and identify himself and his ministry and his mission of fulfilling the prophecy of Isaiah to be good news to the poor, to bring sight to the blind, to free the oppressed. We've seen him begin to teach in the public arena, and people are drawn to him. And he's beginning to call followers, a support team, people who are also learning to be committed to that same mission. We see him begin to fulfill his mission not only by teaching, for sometimes teaching is the most powerful way to free the oppressed mind, but he is healing, and the more he does for people, the more people flock to him, and the success is growing and the popularity is expanding, and what is inevitable begins to occur: opposition. We began to see some of it last week when we spoke of his association with sinners and the outcasts, and we see more of it in today's passage. As we look further into Luke, I'll invite you to read aloud the words in white as I read the words in yellow print. They said to him, "John's disciples often fast and pray, and so do the disciples of the Pharisees, but yours go on eating and drinking."
Jesus answered, "Can you make the friends of the bridegroom fast while he is with them?
But the time will come when the bridegroom will be taken from them. In those last days they will fast."
He told them this parable: "No one tears a piece out of a new garment to patch an old one. Otherwise they will have torn the new garment, and the patch from the new will not match the old.
And no one pours new wine into old wineskins. Otherwise the new wine will burst the skins, the wine will run out, and the wineskins will be ruined.
No, new wine must be poured into new wineskins.
And no one after drinking old wine wants the new, for they say, the old is better." In 1986, a new investor bought a vineyard and surrounding land in the Napa Valley. Began to produce grapes that they would sell to other wine producers in the valley, but saved a particular spot just for a vintage of their own. 6 years later, they produced their first batch of wine. The name of the vineyard, the wine company, was the Screaming Eagle. And among the varieties of wines they produced was a Cabernet. The Screaming Eagle Cabernet 1992 was the first Cabernet of this new vineyard. They only produced a small quantity, so they were an elite producer. And at a wine auction a few years ago, the Screaming Eagle Cabernet 1992 became the most expensive bottle of wine in history. Wow. When at the auction, someone paid $500,000 for one bottle. Now, in all honesty, that was distorted because the auction was for charity, and so the contribution was well above any reasonable value. But it wasn't much later that the collector's market still valued a bottle of that original vintage at $225,000. Very clear, strong evidence that people with a lot of money need adult supervision.
Right.
If you're interested in a more recent vintage of the Screaming Eagle Cabernet, you can probably go online and buy a bottle for $6,000, $7,000, or $8,000. So when you do, give me a call. But it is amazing how much some people think some things are worth. In the collector's market, it's all about that. Why would a Rembrandt sell for $10 million? Why does a stamp sell for $100,000? Why is a baseball card worth $5,000? Well, they're not, right? They are only worth what someone will pay for them. Most things in life have a value based upon what someone's willing to pay for or sacrifice for them. We show the world what's truly important to us by the time and money and other sacrifices we make in order to be part of it. And as it turns out in the real world, sometimes people disagree about what is most valuable. What's most important? What are the things that we'll sacrifice for? What are the things that we will fight for? What are the things that we will never accept? By the time I graduated high school, I'd been living in Vincennes for quite some time. My mother had 2 refrigerators in her kitchen side by side and a stand-up upright chest freezer on the back porch. Any given time, she could go to any one of those appliances and she could find all kinds of possibilities to cook for supper or lunch. As it turned out, our household kind of ran like a short order cafe, and she often had to cook different things for different people. But it was always right there. Always right there. She did the shopping. My dad had a lot of people he knew and traveled around the county quite a bit, so it wasn't unusual for him to come home with, this time of year, a couple of cantaloupes and a bag of tomatoes and maybe some cucumbers and other garden or field produce. But as I rack my memory, I don't know that I can definitely say he ever stepped foot into a grocery store. That was Mom's job. Keep the freezers and the refrigerators filled, and they always were. My wife grew up in a house where there was very little in the refrigerator. There might be a basement with a bunch of canned goods, home canned goods. But it was really fairly common for them, as they were beginning to plan dinner, for someone to go to the store to get this and that so they could complete the menu. And oftentimes it was Anna Mae sending Leonard to the store to grab these things. Their daughter married my parents' son. Whose pattern are we going to adopt when we move into married life? Are we going to do things the way my parents did them? Are we going to do the things the way her parents did them? Are we going to wait till the last moment? She's going to send me to the store to get some things? complain for 34 years now about why we don't have more things in the refrigerator and freezer so we can just cook some food and eat. People have to make decisions about what's important, what's most important, what they'll fight for, what they'll never accept. In the life of the church, it seems inevitable that congregations develop traditions. Sometimes the traditions become the most important thing in the life of that people. This is how we know who we are. This is how we know where we stand, what we think, what's important to us. And sometimes we will fight to maintain those traditions. And sometimes we will not accept changes in those traditions. It's exactly what Jesus begins to run into now that he's becoming more prominent, more visible. He has his belief, he has his purpose, he has his mission. He's stepping out into a world that is dominated by a traditional religious perspective. Now, among the chief priests and the scribes, there are a variety of conflicts between Pharisees and Sadducees and some of the other lesser-known sects of the Jewish faith. They have different concepts of the afterlife, different values about certain traditional practices. But the one thing they all seem to agree on is that they don't like this Jesus and his new way, this controversial way, this sometimes blasphemous way of doing things. They are convinced that the faithful have to qualify to be among the elite. That religion is for the righteous, that God is on the side of the holy. And Jesus has emerged into that world saying, I am here for the sinner. I am here for the poor and the outcast. And you know why these people are outcasts? It's because the elite have cast them out. Why are you partying with sinners? We don't get that. You're not like us. Why do your disciples eat and drink? John's disciples are holy and righteous, and they have their little occasional fasts, and they don't drink of the strong drink. Your people do. People are partying like it's Saturday night. We don't understand that. Or maybe they do. And they're just looking for any little thing. You can tell that the war is on when people are looking for any little thing they can find to cause greater conflict, to push people away or to attract people to their side. Jesus chose sides when he went into ministry. His opposition is holding fast, ready to fight, and eventually willing to sacrifice Jesus for the sake of their beliefs, their traditions, their way of understanding. Because we all decide what's really important to us, what we'll value, what we'll sacrifice for, what we want mindset. Trying to pour the new wine of Jesus' ministry, mission, spirit into the old confining structures and traditions of the Pharisees just won't work. Jesus, the new wine, would simply cause the old wineskins to burst. You can't contain the new spirit within the old traditions. Churches in the past 30 years have often discovered that true growth comes when you throw away the old wineskins. When the new wine is allowed to be free and to create its own new traditions, its own new preferences, its own new vitality. And congregations have tried and tried and tried to blend the two. And it almost never works. And so we've faced a long history of congregations who have decided we're going to go completely new with a new generation. And we've had congregations who have decided we're going to remain completely true to an older or existing generation. And churches can flourish with the old wineskins, and churches can flourish with the new wineskins. But somehow blending the two has caused a great deal of pain and division and trouble. And all we can say is that there's nothing new about that at all. All we can say is that's the same kind of thing that Jesus experienced. And all we can say is we each have the right, the privilege, in fact the responsibility to decide what is important. What will we continue? What won't we let go of? Recognizing the incredible importance of those decisions. Your brothers and sisters at Broadway Christian Church in Princeton are right in the heart of that right now. We've reached a point in Princeton, and this is going to sound kind of familiar to a lot of you, where their building is far too big for their needs. They love their building, but it is becoming an incredible challenge. And some feel like the Spirit is calling them to say, let's leave the building behind and let the ministry continue in some other new way to set it free from the oppression of the building and see what God can do with us. And others, of course, are saying, no, our building is who we are. We can't say either one is right or either one is wrong, but we can definitely analyze what's really important to you and what's really important to you. I would imagine that to be a follower of Jesus and to watch him with excitement and enthusiasm and then see the religious leaders that you had grown up under and a tradition that you had cherished and an identity that you claimed, to see the conflict between the two emerge. people like Peter and Andrew and James and John, watching the conflict between the Jesus they cherished and the faith they had identified with their whole lives, had to be an incredibly painful thing. Even if they were firmly convinced they were right and they were wrong, very painful to see division and conflict. Very painful to realize there's not going to be a compromise here. It's an either or. We either choose Jesus and his mission to the outcast, or we choose the tradition and their celebration of the elite. You can't mix them. You can't pour the one wine into the other wineskin. It just isn't going to work. It's going to be an either or, and decisions have to be made. There is certainly an element of anxiety and fear and pain amongst your brothers and sisters in Princeton. I think we're managing it as it best can be managed, but we do crave and appreciate your prayers as they try to decide where God is calling them, as they live with the reality that not everyone is going to agree, and as they try one more time in their history, as in the history of all congregations, to somehow move their way through conflict, hopefully not leading to division, but finding unity again at some time. People who are serious about their faith and serious about their church will constantly be required to decide what's really important. What will we sacrifice? What won't we sacrifice? And anyone who thinks otherwise, I'm afraid, hasn't read the Gospels. And everyone should be aware that that is what we signed up for. We signed up to follow Jesus along the path that led him into opposition, that led him into difficult decisions, that led him through pain and suffering, denial, betrayal, and death. And to think that we can change the world in our day any easier than he tried to change it in his is just fantasy. But Jesus had a confidence about him, an assurance that he was doing what he was called to do. He felt empowered by that faith, that confidence. He found great satisfaction in seeing the difference his spirit, his teachings, his behavior could have on the world. I would think he must have had a long vision and a great deal of patience and understanding that no, unlike what some of his followers wanted, unlike what much of Judaism expected from a Messiah, the world was not going to be changed in an instant. But every single soul that he could draw onto his side, every person who agreed with him that ministry is for those who need us, every person who was willing to forsake the old wineskin for the new wine was a step closer. Every person that joined him in his ministry and his mission helped impact the lives of other people around him. each one of you, in whatever way you have found in your life, to join Jesus in that mission. Every little thing, every significant thing you've done. Donating hours to help with the ministry, to serve the poor, the needy, the brokenhearted. Every penny you've contributed to any cause that sought to bring support to someone who was lost or forsaken, or whose life had been shattered, has been evidence of your decision, your follow-through to help Jesus pursue his mission. It has been evidence of what is important to you. And we could very easily decide to pick apart each one of ourselves. We can choose the path of the Pharisees, and we can find the 60% of the life, 60% of the time when John has acted selfishly or foolishly or not acted at all. Or we can look and say, John, we've seen the 40% of the time when you seem to have been true to Jesus. We can pick apart 90% of the decisions a person has made in their lives and shown them as a failure. Or we can celebrate the 10% of the decisions in which their life truly reflected the call to follow Jesus. But Christ lives in that 10%. And the mission continues in that 10%. And every single moment you've spent following Jesus has helped him complete that work. Every single penny you devoted to any ministry that helped others, including your contributions to the church treasury that not only helps you, but it helps the people sitting in front of you and beside you and across the aisle from you. Every single act, every single penny is evidence of what's important to you. Evidence that Jesus has made an impact. Evidence that the mission continues. Not an easy one, but thanks be to God and thanks to you, a mission that continues. And there we find hope. And there we find motivation. And there we find courage. And there we're reminded that with God all things are possible. Let us pray. Yes, God, we wish things were a bit simpler. Sometimes it would be nice never to have to make a decision at all. But that's not the real world we live in. It's not worthy of us. It's not worthy of you. It's not worthy of the Christ to whom we have pledged our lives. And so we give thanks for every positive, loving, caring, gracious impact we've had on the world. Grateful for the people around us without whom we could not be who we are. Grateful for the times in which together we have risen to the challenge and we have done what was necessary to serve your children and the community around us and the world around us. Grateful that you give us these opportunities to be part of something so marvelous, so glorious, so gracious. Continue, O God, to help us maneuver our way and choose our way and find our way through the chaos and the conflict and the diversions and distractions of life, that we can truly stand with Jesus and be counted among the faithful. Through Christ our Lord.